Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is brought to you by, well, you. If you want to learn how to support our show, go to patreon.com/laststandmedia. Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to Sacred Symbols Plus, a PlayStation podcast supplement. My name is Colin Moriarty. Today I'm joined by a very special guest indeed, Ian from 616 Entertainment. This is your third? Fifth?
Yes, sir.
Holy shit. All right. I'm way off on that. Fifth time being on the show. Welcome, my friend. How are you today?
I am pretty good. You know what? Last time I came on, I told you I had a bone to pick with you.
Yeah.
And I picked it, and I got another bone to pick with you.
Sure.
You keep going on these diatribes about people who wear hats and how if somebody wears a hat, you assume they're bald.
Mm-hmm.
I had long hair since I was a teenager, and it was always limp. I could never style it, so I just jam it into my hat. The hat is just part of my look. I don't even think about it.
Sure.
It's like your earrings. You don't take them out. They're just part of you. Now, a couple of years ago, I would have been a better person to make this bit because last year, my hair bombed like Concord.
Really?
But for years, I just liked hats. So not a good person to make this point now, but I would have been.
Yeah, you turned that around on me. That's interesting. So wait, you lost your hair rapidly to the point where you wanted to just shave it off or whatever?
Yeah, dude. When I'll be 34 in a couple months. And when I hit like 31, I was like, oh, that doesn't look so good. And then like 32, it was like, oh, this is going to Hulk Hogan like within a year. So
interesting. Were you finding hair or like, what did you notice like in your shower or something?
I mean, it was just kind of getting out of the shower and like drying my hair and stuff and then being in the mirror and being like, oh, that's not great.
Yeah.
So unless you're dropping the big leg and you got the world title, you can't be Hulk Hogan.
Yeah,
so.
Totally. I try to keep an eye on I look at old pictures. Like, I don't know if it's thinning. I don't think it is. I've always had a huge forehead. So it's like, I think I'm okay. We've talked about this so many times that like my dad is like, you know, like totally thinning and like looks like Benjamin Franklin basically. And but my mom's dad, which is apparently where you get it from, had a thick head of hair his whole life, even when he had cancer. So I don't know. I'm kind of hoping to kind of hold on to it. But I've been open. Like, I'm not much of a vain person at all, but I will get hair plugs if necessary. You know,
I remember you saying that because you had said in the past, like, oh, if you're just bald, be bald. And then like a month later, you were like, oh, if I was bald, I would fix it. I was like, what the fuck is he talking about?
Well, I think because I'm not going to get bald, you know?
Oh, yeah, you won't.
Well, maybe I will. I'm very lazy. So I might just notice it and then be like, well, it's over at this point. And it's fine.
No, if you have it in your genetics, you had a hairline that overcame cancer. That is a Hulk Hogan hairline in the wrestling sense.
Yeah,
sure. He doesn't do jobs. So.
Sure. Well, it's good to see you, my friend. You run the 616 Entertainment. It's a YouTube channel. Do you do live stuff too? Let me look here. No,
I kind of hate doing live shit.
Yeah, me too.
No.
Cool, man. So it's a lot of. I thought you were perfect for this because to kind of give everyone a little bit of context. I bought Until Dawn Remake. Sony has completely ignored this release more than I was trying to think like what's the last game that they released from a first or second party where they just ignored it like this. And I was like, I think it's that game Shadow of the Beast, which was a remake, which came out, I want to say in 2018 or 2019. They just never acknowledged it. And Shadow of the Beast is an old Amiga game. And they own that IP because they bought Psygnosis back in the early 90s, who owned that IP. So they like remade it. And so I was like, yeah, this is probably the first time in 5-ish years or so where they've released something of size. And then they're like, we're not even going to acknowledge it, which is a sign of what they think of it. And I'm really interested to see what you think of Until Dawn Remake and also the original Until Dawn. I've been playing. So I played Until Dawn Remake. I beat it in a couple of days. I just played it straight up. Without a guide or whatever, just to see what happens. And then I went back to the original Until Dawn, and which I had beaten in 2015 a couple of times. And then I started playing through that and with a guide to get all the collectibles and stuff. And I'm on chapter 9 in that. So I've been very Until Dawn imbued in the last week or so. Have you noticed, by the way, before we even just as a prologue, like no one's talking about this game. No one seems to acknowledge it. It's nowhere on any splash screen on PlayStation Network. You have to like go search for it. very strange. I don't think it's that bad. I mean, Jesus Christ. But what are your thoughts on this?
It's funny that you say that because you had spoken about other games in the past where you would look at your friends list because it's full and you'd be like, well, there's this many people playing it. I have like 330 people on my friends list. 4 people are playing it, and one of them is you. And I would not have bought it if you did not send me this email. So that
Right.
easily could have been even fewer people. But you had mentioned that PlayStation's not talking about it. They're not promoting it. I have a buddy named Jerry Horror. He's got like a horror movies podcast. And he had Larry Fessenden, who wrote this game,
Yeah.
on his podcast. He said that back then, he felt Sony didn't promote the original at all, and they eventually apologized about it and said, like, hey, we should have backed this. It's bigger than we thought it was going to be.
Totally.
So for them to do it again, it's like, what is happening?
Yeah, it's weird. Like, I will say before we get into it that I think the remake is substantially worse than the original in my opinion. But
Interesting.
But I knew, in my opinion, it's all obviously subjective, but in playing it before I went back to Until Dawn, the original, I was like, I don't think this is like necessary, really. Like is the old one fucking mega ugly or something, or control like trash or whatever? And then I went back to it and I'm like, no, this is better. I mean, like but especially on PS5 because it runs at 60 frames. Oh, so buttery smooth on PS5. But the reason that I reached out to you, Ian, because we've had you on to talk about, God, what was it? Horror? Did we talk about horror? Like, you're a horror themed person, so it must have been.
I do all sorts of shit. So I first came on because I had reached out to you and I was like, if you ever want to talk about wrestling games, I'm your
wrestling.
guy.
That's what it was.
So we did that. And then we did Grand Theft Auto 3.
Right.
And then that journal from that old developer came out. So like 2 weeks later, you were like, hey, you want to come back? And I was like,
right. So that's 3.
And then there was a 4th one in there somewhere. And Mortal Kombat. That's what it was.
Mortal Kombat. That makes sense. Yeah. I say that only because I was like serendipitously looking at your YouTube. I'm looking at it now. Your YouTube channel. It is all horror, or most horror. There's like a little wrestling in there, boxing. And what else? There's something. No, this is basically all horror and wrestling. Yeah. So that's why I reached out to you, because basically, all right. So to give everyone a little bit of a background, like in Discord, on our staff Discord, with all the people like The Last Stand hosts and stuff like that, we have all these different channels for all the different shows, and then we post like what we're playing. And often someone else is playing everything. Like I've never had any problem. There's what? Let me see. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. There's 11 of us in there. So between us, there's usually 2 people at least that are playing everything. And like no one was playing Until Dawn. And then I was like, okay, I don't like asking people to, or like forcing people to do like play games they don't want to play. So I'm like, all right. And then I was trying to figure out like who amongst us is into horror, or might have a predilection towards this game. And then I thought of you. I emailed you. You said you hadn't bought it, but that you would do it for the show, which I appreciate. It's a short game. It's only 8 hours. So you really could just do it in like, if you eat dinner and then like just sit with it until 2 a.m., you could probably do it all in one take if you wanted. So I appreciate you doing that. And I felt like it was kind of an important game to talk about because on one hand, it's not nearly as bad as some people are saying it is. And it's not nearly as bad as Sony feels it is, I think, in their total hesitance to talk about it and to release it on top of Silent Hill 2. I mean, to act like they had no say in Silent Hill 2 coming out 4 days later is nonsense. Even though it's a Konami game and a third-party game, it's coming to their console. They can listen. Not that I'm fucking Konami, but I release games and you have to find slots. Like you can't just be like, I want to release on this date. You got to like go through the process. So there's a lot of indications if you just look and squint a little bit where you're like, yeah, you guys aren't into it. Plus, Ballistic Moon laid off people before the game even came out, and then there's like the irony, the deepest irony of all is that the game blatantly teases a sequel. And Hayden Panettiere is in the fucking game again with new stuff. Did you watch the interview with her at the end? Like I did. Now, it's not about her beauty or her looks. It doesn't look like her. Like Micah and I, my wife, were watching it and I'm like, I don't even see it. Like that doesn't look like her at all. It just looks like a different fucking person. Like if you told me that was like, who is this? I'd be like, I could stare at that picture for 10 fucking minutes and I would never tell you it was Hayden Panettiere, So, so there's like, it's like, okay, so you had this game remade, brought it off of Decima onto Unreal, released it, told no one, and then greenlit a sequel and embedded it in the game.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. I don't know what that's all about. So yeah, what are your high level thoughts? I've been rambling here for a little while, but what are your
No,
thoughts
you're
here?
fine. It does seem strange to me that they fully insinuate that there will be a sequel with the new footage that they have of her, and then they brought her back to do like extra interviews. That's what
Mm,
you're talking about. To your point, uh, I like pretty much every other, to quote George Costanza, heterosexual man with a staunch record was in love with Hayden Panettiere for a long time,
oh yeah,
and then
definitely, definitely.
I saw her in this interview, and I was like, oh, you look a little different. And it's not like, oh, she aged a little bit. I think she might have messed with her face a little bit. I don't
What a
know.
shame, dude. I mean, like, are you
Dude,
kidding?
that's
Yeah,
what's the quote from Superbad? It's like slapping God in the face for giving you a beautiful gift. It's like, what the fuck?
she was like one of the most naturally beautiful people I've ever seen, really, in
Absolutely.
Hollywood. It's
Yeah.
really crazy.
With the sequel tease, I found it weird that with the new footage, they showed like a scar on her arm that she didn't have before.
Mm.
And then she straight up says like, that doesn't just appear and you don't go looking for the answers. I was then expecting like Until Dawn and then maybe like a 2 behind it, and they don't do that. So are they waiting to see how this does before they confirm it? Are they poking the audience, being like, huh? What do you think? But according to my friends list, it doesn't seem like people give a shit.
Yeah, I think even on PSN profiles, even like which is opt-in, it's like it's interesting to go there because it's the most hardcore people. So the per capita sales are going to be way higher there than they are elsewhere. And when you have like 1,000 people playing your game, it means like that's sold, you know, tens of thousands of copies or something like that. It's probably, I would say Until Dawn Remake is probably in the low hundreds of thousands at this point, probably something like that, discovered by people and played, and maybe is appearing on splash screens, but it's certainly not setting the world on fire. And they didn't,
Mm-mm.
it is important, I just know this from my connections, that Sony didn't send the game to anyone.
Yeah.
So, or they might have sent it the day before or something like that. So you couldn't hit the like any sort of embargo. So they clearly just don't believe in it. The rumors, or I've talked about in the past that I understand from someone, and I've talked about this before, although I don't know the details of it, that Firesprite is working on some sort of horror game, or maybe that was like the rumor about them in one of the games they're working on, more newly acquired, Sony acquired studio. And then someone had come out and said that they're the ones making Until Dawn 2. And I'm like, that doesn't, maybe that is. I don't have any insight into that, but I'm like, that doesn't make any sense, because why would you have Ballistic Moon make the first one? This reminded me a lot of Sly Cooper with Sanzaru. Like,
Sure.
they released the Sly collection, the Sly 4 trailers in the collection when you platinum all the games, and then it reveals that they've been working on Sly 4 the whole time. It felt like that a little bit. They were much more proud and excited about that game than they are about this game, of course. And it is worth noting that that's relevant because Ballistic Moon was founded by and staffed by people from Supermassive. So the reason that it made sense for them to do it is because they kind of spun off of Supermassive, and Supermassive is obviously off in like Dark Pictures anthology land now, which is great, and doing some other stuff. And I don't mean great critically, because I don't know. I mean, it's great that they're doing that, but they're busy.
Mm-hmm.
And it seemed like they were going to become a first party at some point, and that just never worked out. I think because they ended up going with Bandai Namco for Dark Pictures anthology and kind of just walked away. So I think Sony found like a way where it's like, these guys are kind of familiar with this, and maybe they can make some tweaks to it if they feel like it, and they can most importantly port it, because it's on the original Until Dawn, strangely, is on Decima, which is the Killzone engine, and the engine that's still used today for Horizon and for Death Stranding, but no one else uses it. So they've moved it to Unreal, and as I'm sure you know, because you just played the remake, they kind of just opened it up and made it into a third-person adventure game as opposed to a fixed camera angle horror game, which I think really undercuts the horror in the game.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I only really realized that in playing through the original again and being like, yeah, like the way everything's framed, it's framed like a movie. Every shot is kind of framed like a shot in a film. You're seeing it from a certain perspective. You're not swinging the camera around and shit like that. It's supposed to be less kinetic and more experiential. But what did you think about the overall, like, so what did you think about the overall experience of Until Dawn Remake before we get into the finer points? Did you enjoy your playthrough? As I understand from our email correspondence, you played the original Until Dawn but never beat it, which is right. Is that what you said? Which surprises me, just because it's short and it seems like it's up your alley. So I'm surprised that you had never played it. But I must admit, it's been 9 years since I played it, and I didn't remember fucking anything. Like, I remembered set pieces and like at the cabin and all that kind of stuff, but I didn't even remember who the killer was, which was hysterical. When it happened, I'm like, oh yeah. You know, I'm an asshole. You know, I'm also not very, with these horror movies, I'm never the one that like solves it. I'm always surprised. Yeah. You know, so yeah, give me your high level 30,000 foot thoughts here.
My experience with it might be a little unique because back in the day, I had said to my girlfriend, like, oh, this game is like a horror movie. Let's play it together. And I think we got through maybe 2 or 3 chapters. She totally lost interest. And there was a whole bunch of other shit that I wanted to play. So I put it down, never wound up going back to it. So the remake, this is my first time seeing all of the game. And maybe that's kind of a unique angle. I don't have the original experience to compare everything to. So I have seen a lot of complaining about how the blue color palette, like those tones across the entire game from the original, have been lessened and kind of pulled away from the remake. Early on in the remake, it's very orange, it's very warm because it's daytime. Coming at it from that angle, I have to say I actually prefer the warmer color palette of the remake at first, because then when the sun goes down and shit starts to get weird, I don't feel like, well, it's been pitch black the whole time. We kind of get into the zone of like, oh, now shit is getting real. Like the sun's not out, the bushy squirrels aren't around anymore. I saw a comparison of several scenes side by side, and it's Hayden Panettiere, and she's like feeding the squirrel. In the original, it's fucking pitch black, and like
because it's
Go
dark
ahead.
when they change the time. This is a big controversy with some people, is like they change the time of day in the beginning of the game. You know, like she gets there when it's dark already in the original. Yeah.
I think it makes more sense for them to be showing up in the
I
fucking
agree.
shows up at 11 p.m.
Right.
You
No,
know?
I agree. People, it does fuck with the palette, but it does make a little more sense. Like you're there at dusk or whatever.
Yeah.
And that's the setting of many. I'm not a fucking huge horror movie. I like horror movies a lot. I'm not a horror movie aficionado by any stretch of the imagination, but that seems somewhat common. Like the golden hour sort of light leading into a dusk, leading into
Absolutely.
the darkness. You know,
and I think it sandwiches it better too, because the sun's up, everything's golden, and it's beautiful. Then it's dark, all the fucked up shit happens, and then you get to the end of the game, dawn is here, and it's bright again. It just visually it makes more sense. The game is like 8 to 10 hours long, so from a time perspective, it makes more sense. The change in color palette worked for me, so I don't have any complaints about that. The camera being very different, it had, like you said, it had been so long, I barely remembered. But after I finished the remake, and then I went and I watched like side by side of the original and the remake, there were times where the new camera had me fucked up, and like someone would block me just like doing a 360, and I couldn't get around them.
Yeah.
But I wasn't playing the remake going, I kind of wish I had 1996 Resident Evil cameras. They're cool. But if I'm playing a game in 2024, I don't mind it being over the shoulder. It makes me feel I'm more comfortable with it that way, I guess.
Yeah, I agree with you generally speaking. I just think in service of this particular game,
Sure.
and that it's older, this is why as I was playing the remake, I'm like, okay, ported it to another engine, get it off of Decima, and you want to fuck with it, and you want to change things, obviously, and you want to make it more open or more modern. But I just think it's not, it just, like I said, it's not Silent. I haven't played Silent Hill 2 yet, but it's not like this, or Resident Evil, where it's an action horror game, or Dead Space or something, Callisto Protocol, where you're kind of moving around and exploring these environments. It's not really about that, because though the game doesn't always rush you along, you kind of are on a clock. The game is constantly telling you what time it is. And every time you're a new character, it gives you the exact time you're playing. The choices are kind of, timed, and there's button prompts and QTEs and all that kind of stuff. So it's not about seeing the environment like that, in my opinion. It's not about, oh, what's over here in this corner? It's like, it doesn't even matter. Like, you wouldn't even look over there. The camera's not even going to look there. Like, it's framed like this as a scene, and you're walking down the path with your back towards it. And it's like, okay. And then it's to the side. And I'm like, yeah, that would be fucking horrible in most games. And again, it is very 90s PS1, but not for this game, in my opinion. And
sure,
I felt like the original is just a lot scarier, because it forces you to see things through certain perspectives. Like, think about the jump scares and the things you're supposed to see in the game. Like, and you see it in flashbacks, especially late in the game, when they show you, like, there's a scene where one of them is like thinking back and like realizing he's seen the Wendigo or whatever, and all these different things. And it's like, yeah, you could see those in the shot, but in the UE5 version, it's like, if the camera's facing that way, you'll see it. Yeah. Like, but in the original, you did see it, because it made it framed it. And so it's just it's a subjective view on the perspective of the game. I think like some people are going to have different wear on it, but it wasn't obvious to me that I felt like that until, again, I went back and played the original again. And just a quick little, I don't know if you're into this sort of thing. the like kind of the digital nostalgia. Like I sent my save for Until Dawn to the cloud, and it overwrote a save from August 2015. You know,
Yeah.
and I was like, there's still something sad about that. You know,
Oh, yeah, absolutely. In my wrestling game retrospectives, there was one specific video where, as I was covering this game, I looked at my PS2 memory card and I had the actual save file from 2007. And I was looking at the date, and maybe this is why I identify with you so much, because I feel like I've heard you say stuff like this. I looked at the date and it was like 2007. I was like, okay, so my parents were getting divorced here. My mom had just moved out. I was purposely bombing in high school to see if anyone would notice that, like, how badly I was struggling.
yeah,
And as I was covering that game, I had to overwrite the save file, and in some way it was like letting go of all of that shit. So I totally understand what you're
yeah.
talking about with that.
It's funny. Yeah, you and I are very much lined up with that, because I did. I went and looked up what day of the week the date was,
Yeah,
and
that's extreme.
and it was a Saturday into a Sunday, and I'm like, yeah, I kind of remember this actually, because it was very, very late in a relationship I was in with someone I went to high school with, actually. And she had moved out, actually. We lived together for like several years, and she moved out to like be closer to work. And that was like the beginning of the end. But I went and visited her, and I brought my PS4. She was like not really into games, but she appreciated them. And there were certain things like she was really into. And I was like, you'll really like this game. And it must have been our save. And I was like, that's so interesting, because I do remember that. And then like 2 weeks later, we broke up, you know? So
Yeah.
it's like, damn. So I just overrode that save. And that was the last time I had ever experienced the game. So much, that was the first year of Kind of Funny. So that was so much has happened since then. And yeah, I knew you'd appreciate that, because
Absolutely.
most people don't give a shit about that stuff. But I'm like, yeah, that's interesting. You know, there's that Twitter account, Old Internet. That's pretty good too. That gets into some of that stuff and shows pictures from back then and all that. Anyway, if you
Wait,
want to pick that up.
real quick, when you talk
Yeah.
about appreciating what you were on before about the camera angles and
Mhm.
how with the new camera, you either see it or you don't. There's a chance that you could miss it. I appreciate that as a big fan of horror movies. It's not out yet, but I just did a video review on the 2021 Candyman. And one of the things that I pointed out was there are times in this movie where you're going to be looking for the reflection of the Candyman in every mirror, in every window, and sometimes you'll find him. But what I love is that there's no musical stinger. They don't zoom on it. Nobody notices. He's there, and you can completely miss it.
Yeah, that's cool.
And that sort of restraint I actually really like. So with the remake, when they show you like, oh, the Wendigo is over there, it can kind of give you a feeling of like, motherfucker, he was watching me that whole time, and I didn't know.
Sure, that's a great point. That's a really great point. When you do these retrospectives, by the way, do you use footage from do you capture the movie?
Yes.
So do you get in trouble for doing that ever, or does no one care? I'm curious for my own edification, because I watch a lot of this stuff, and I'm always curious how the fuck anyone gets away with it.
So it's so funny. Like, I make sure, because I know all the rules surrounding fair use. You know, I make sure I never use more than 5 seconds of consecutive footage. I chop the shit out of it. I very rarely use audio from the movies. I'm talking over most of it. But there are certain studios that will get really pissed off, and certain ones don't care at all. Dude, Universal is so up my ass right now over the Chucky and Child's Play videos I'm doing. They claimed a section of the Child's Play 2 video, and I disputed it because I was like, I will gladly invite you to play my video and your film side by side. You can see how highly transformed it is. I'm not stealing anything. And I'm right, but they just said, nah, and they upheld their claim, and there's really dick I can do about it.
Yeah, like it's funny. I got claimed a few times when I still did like side quest videos. So this was years ago. Yeah. And I kind of was afraid of challenging anyone, because it's like, what does that mean? And it's like, you have to certify that everything's true. And then like, yeah. And then like,
they try to make it intimidating.
Yeah. It's like, I'm telling the truth. Like, why would I, but you think they're going to get you in some way. And I give you credit for even fucking with them, because to me, I'm like, all right, you win. It's like the IRS. Like when you get a letter from every once in a while, I'll get a letter from the IRS, over the years, and it's like, oh, you underpaid, X amount. I was like, oh, fine.
Yeah.
Like, fine, just take it. I'll give you twice as much. Just leave me alone. Don't talk to me anymore.
I think the reason that I'm maybe confident in challenging a lot of them is because I know that I'm right. And 95% of the time, they will release the claim. But Universal, it's really annoying because they can say like, no, we think our claim is valid, and there's nothing I can really do about it. And that's just them blatantly not playing by the rules. And what the fuck am I gonna do about that? You know? So
Yeah,
if I knew that I was stealing, I wouldn't challenge it. But I never do. So
it sucks. Yeah, it's like you want to stay away from that distributor, I guess, in some sense. It's what I learned about Nintendo. They were the ones that kept fucking with me. And everyone, it wasn't like, I don't even know if it was automatic. I think a lot of these things are just they just scrub through videos and find commonalities, especially with audio, like you were saying. But to the point where I was like, I refuse to use any Nintendo stuff. And I started drawing. People might remember I started drawing shit in Paint, and then putting it in. So like it would be like all this beautiful footage of other games, but then it would be like Zelda, like just drawn in like Microsoft Paint and like panning over it because I refused to use their shit. So anyway, I was just curious about that. I had you captive, so I thought I would get a little information from you. What did you think about the 30 frames thing and there being no option for 60 frames? This was listen, I'm not a technical person, Ian. Everyone knows this. But what is it about this game that precludes you from running it at a smooth 60 frames when Horizon Forbidden West runs and Cyberpunk and all these other games that are just fucking bloated beyond belief and really stretching the realm of what PS5 is capable of? They run beautifully, and this game runs like kind of like shit, to be honest with you. The 30 frames is not locked by any stretch of the imagination, and it really hurts it. And again, only when playing it at 60 frames on PS5 in the original, I was like, damn, dude. That might be a big reason why I think the original is better, is because it just looks better, in my opinion. Like and it's not the aesthetic specifically, it's the way it runs. Was it distracting to you? It was distracting as fuck to me.
So the first thing, any PS5 game, turn it on. Before I start the game, I go into the settings. You got to put it on fidelity mode. Or no, performance mode. Performance mode, yeah. Totally botched it. Trying to make a point. I fucked it up.
You fucked it up.
You always got to go frame rate first. So I go into the settings and I'm like, oh, it's not where I thought it would be. Go to the next panel. Okay, there's just no option for this, which I don't really understand. When you ask why can games like Horizon do it and this can't, I would imagine, not to be a dickhead, but maybe just the level of talent at the studio.
Yeah, probably.
I don't know how there's no reason why. And I've seen a lot of people complaining about major performance issues with this game. I had one hard crash right before somebody died, so it kind of spoiled that was coming when I restarted. But I kind of feel like Chris's experience with Cyberpunk. Up until Chapter 8, I didn't have too much going on that I noticed. Getting into Chapter 8, the frame rate started chugging. There were times that people would speak and their mouth didn't move at all. And I was like, okay, this is getting a little fucked up.
Yeah.
But the majority of my experience was actually pretty okay.
There's some level of irony in it, in the sense that I think Horizon Forbidden West is the most beautiful console game I've ever seen, if not the most beautiful video game I've ever seen, just in the way it runs and the way it looks. And ironically, it runs on Decima, which is the engine that they were fleeing from to get to kind of open things up with Unreal. I assume PS5, I think it's already been confirmed that PS5 Pro will have a patch for this, or this game will have a patch for PS5 Pro, and maybe that will boost the frame rate. But I was surprised by, and I think this is a major reason why Sony didn't, and it hasn't talked about it and hasn't really backed it, is because it's just not up to snuff technically. Yeah. And I gotta say, man, I was trying to read around. I Googled around, like, what are some of the differences that I didn't know, like, what are the differences between the two versions, things that I didn't notice or whatever. And there are a few things, but I was surprised by how much I continuously encountered people being like, well, the game is undeniably more beautiful than the original and stuff. And I'm like, it's definitely a PS5 game, not a PS4 game. And it definitely looks the part in some sense, but I truly don't believe it looks better than the original. I think there's something kind of off with it. It's not even about the lighting. The character models look strange to me. Like, the way people's faces look on these new models or whatever, or these redone forms of them, their faces, it's especially pronounced with Dr. Hill, where their faces, they're making their normal, they're like a squint, wide-eyed, curious, like all these, but it's happening like really quick. Like, everyone's faces are moving in like these weird ways. I can't put it into words. Like, even in my notes, it's just confusingly written. I'm like, what is it about? If you watch the Dr. Hill footage, it's like he's squinting and then he's like wide-eyed and he's like, and it's like, what is going on with your face? Like, and it's not like that in the original. Like it's not as quite that seriously emotive. And I also think the characters look way older, and they already look
absolutely
old.
look older.
Mike looks like he's 35. You know?
He looks like he's 35. He acts like he's 35. He becomes Nathan Drake in the later chapters.
That's so funny.
It was unbelievable.
I kept saying that too. He is like his whole quippiness. It's very Drake. And there's a specific thing with him and Jess where they're in the cabin and she realizes she lost her cell phone and she says, my parents are going to kill me. And I'm like, you guys aren't, I forgot you're like 17. Like you're not 30 because you look 30.
It's ridiculous. There are, you know what? I'm going to say this too. I have heard Chris say that it's annoying that any guy with glasses, it's like, oh, that looks like you. This motherfucker, Chris, looks a little bit like Chris Ray Gun.
Yeah,
a little bit.
It's definitely, I appreciate what he's saying, but it's definitely much more Chris Ray Gun than most of the things people say look like him. That's the unfortunate reality of the situation. Yeah, I agree with you.
With their faces, Dr. Hill, shout out to Peter Stormare. There were several times where I did notice exactly what you're talking about, where he would lean forward and be like, do you even know if this is real? Yeah. And like every emotion on it was like whoever was programming it just started Donkey Konging their keyboard.
Yeah, it's very weird. I just don't think it looks as fine. Like it definitely, it's hard to describe. It's like, I think there's real beauty in the original Super Mario Brothers. Like there's a real beauty in the way it looks. And you can make it an SNES game like Super Mario World, but it doesn't mean the original isn't beautiful and doesn't work like perfectly the way it looks. And again, going back to the PS4 version, it's like, yeah, you made a more sophisticated looking game and you redid all the set pieces and everything looks good, but it didn't look wrong to begin with. So it's kind of an unnecessary, it's like painting a wall that's already been painted. It's like, yeah, it's a different color now, but it really was fine the way it was. That's why it's like, why didn't you just put work into making the original one better? Like just being like, we're just going to do a $10 upgrade like you did with Horizon, because it already looks great. I was really actually, Ian, surprised when I was playing. I was like, this looks great. They were making this like 10, 12 years ago. You know, it's like kind of crazy that it looks this good.
In the comparisons that I watched to get a feel for the original, because you emailed me about doing this episode like a day and a half ago. And I was like, fuck, okay, I got a marathon through the remake. But I needed to have some reminder of the original. Watching the side-by-sides of the same scenes, I was like, okay, I feel like the PS5 looks better there, cleaner here. There were certain scenes where it was like, oh, the PS4 version just looks better. Like sometimes even the textures. Specifically, there's a part where Josh and Chris are like pushing a garbage can or something to a window so that they can get in. From the textures to the lighting to even their faces, I would think that the PS5 version was the PS4 version. So the way some of it was not consistent was strange to me. And I think this probably would be getting a lot more attention if it were a lot cheaper. And just one more bit about the overdone faces, and sometimes the new faces don't look right. I don't know if you experienced this or if it was a bug, but there's a part where Jess and Mike take a selfie together. And they have the phone up and they're like posing for the phone. I swear to God, Mike was like smiling and they just went, and his mouth just gaped open and his eyes were wide. And then, of course, that's the photo I took.
Awesome.
And they didn't let me look at it later. I wish they did because it would have been great. But one other note on this, it must have been a bug. At the end of the game, near the end, you read a journal. And it's the details from Flamethrower Guy, who is played by the writer, Larry Fessenden. He says that you can see the signs, like the eyes go milky white and things start to change. Several times, Hayden Panettiere's eyes grayed out for me. And then at one point, Jess's did. And I was watching everybody closely because I was kind of paranoid that, I don't know, somebody would change or something. But I think they were just visual bugs. And they had me on the hook that something story-related was going to happen.
Interesting. That's so funny. Unintentional horror.
Yeah.
There is like some weird unexplained stuff in the plot. I think like the seemingly like possessed deer and
the elk that like backed them up against the cliff.
Yeah. Like, well, let's talk a little bit about the story and the setup and stuff like that. So And I'm especially curious from your kind of expertise with horror films and horror fairs, like where it kind of rates, as far as, because it seems like a pretty standard plot. Like you said, what's the guy's name I had? Oh yeah, Larry Fessenden. I looked him up because I don't know anything about this stuff at all. And he's got like he's done a lot of stuff, which I'm sure you know as a producer, as a writer. But what I didn't realize is he's written, or he at one point wrote all of Supermassive's games, like up to the original. He wrote Man of Medan, and I guess he backed out after that. But he wrote The Impatient and Hidden Agenda, and even Rush of Blood. So he's very familiar and really helped shape what Supermassive would become, which is pretty interesting in and of itself. But the game is about 8 teenagers that I guess convene on a mountain retreat that's owned by one of the families within that group. That's one of the coolest parts of the plot, I think, is how understated why this is all happening. Like their money, their like the growing up around horror and having access to the props and like doing all these kinds of things that make it out. It's kind of cool, and they never really get into it at all. They like there's like an award collectible and like some documentation and posters. There's like the movie room that kind of indicates that something's going on, and obviously just the wealth of them, which is cool. But the year before, they all convene to like for I guess this yearly retreat as friends. They set up one of the sisters to be embarrassed by one of the guys trying to hook up with each other or whatever. They end up running outside, and the twin sister goes outside, and they both end up dying. So then they come back. So the whole setup to me is weird in and of itself, because you think this would be such a scarring event, especially because you were responsible for it. You know, that you would be like, I never want to see these people again. We can't go back here. It's all actually quite surreal in some sense. And I wonder if that's intentional. I have no idea. But so yeah, what do you think of the whole setup, and where does that it seems pretty traditional teen, sexy teens. They all want each other. The parents aren't around. They have no cell service. It's like all the kind of usual things, Yeah. So
I have several notes about this. First of all, they set up Hannah. She's the one that they are pranking. Like, oh, the handsome jock guy in the group, he does like you, and they're gonna like record her embarrassing herself, and then I don't know, put it on the internet. These don't sound like friends. First of all,
it's horrible.
So
yeah,
and they, from her journals to the way that they talk about her, like, how could she think Mike would be into her? Hannah is a fucking babe. She looks like Mia Khalifa. And like they talk about her like she's this ugly duckling, It's like not another teen movie like where they take the girl's glasses off and the guy's like, now you're hot, which doesn't make any sense anyway, because women with glasses, how you doing? But yeah, so that's ridiculous. The whole point of everybody there is responsible for their deaths, and then they just come back to party. I thought maybe that was to kind of guide you into how you would play the characters. I tried to use Emily to make selfish and shitty decisions because that's how they present her. And I tried to use Hayden Panettiere to be like the level-headed, kind person, because that's kind of how they present these people. Over time, I did throw that away because it's hard for me to let people do bad shit. I just wanted everybody to survive. I was like, Emily doesn't deserve to die because she's a fucking bitch. She just has to be a little nicer.
Right.
But yeah, the setup is, there's a lot of irons in the fire, and between Flamethrower Guy, the Wendigo, Josh is a heel, which I knew immediately. There's a lot going on, and it kind of feels like several games mashed into one. It feels like this was written by a guy who writes movies, and they were like, hey, we need something like 6 times as long. That's what you normally do.
That's funny. So you did figure it out, or like know at least that it was a setup in some sense from the beginning?
Yeah, I knew. I could tell Josh was off his rocker. First of all, Rami Malek he kind of has a heel's face. He's a handsome guy, but you're like,
he's an interesting looking person. Like he's definitely like an interesting. He's very unique looking. Yeah.
I feel like that could be noted too in this age of weird Dragon Age decisions and like Mary Jane's face changes. Everybody in this game is still super hot. They didn't really like fuck with anybody's appearance. And nowadays you might expect that they would, but I don't think that they did. There are several characters that I'm like, specifically Mike. In the original, he looks like a normal, handsome guy. In this one, it's like, God damn, Mike. Like
Yeah,
the
all these.
new haircut, the poofy hair, like Jesus, man.
It's like all of these, like, yeah, it's these 30-year-old Canadians.
You had mentioned that you lost track of their age several times. So did I.
Yeah, you
And
forget.
just
Like, it's almost it's like you're in high school. It's like, no,
it's
no, you're not.
ridiculous.
Like,
Yeah.
what? Like, nothing. You're not acting like you're in high school. You're not talking like you're talking like maybe you're like in college. But even
Yeah.
then, it's like you just all seem so much older. I will say from the new models or whatever, I felt like there was a real inconsistency in them. Like, where I thought Ashley like was really well done, and then I thought Jess was like really poorly done. Where it was like, wow, like I would imagine different people or different crews were assigned to maybe some of these characters, and you can kind of usually don't see that level of, in my opinion, like different quality levels with protagonists. You might see
Sure.
that when you go into like a town and you're talking to some side quest fucking person and they look like a Muppet, but typically not with that. So, yeah, I brought this up too, that they're Canadians. That is one cool thing I think about the story, is that it takes place in Canada. And I actually Googled, because I was like, is there any game that takes place in Canada? And that I know of. And there were a few that came up that I was like, okay, Celeste apparently takes place in Canada, or that's what it says, which I played that. And then maybe a Deus Ex game takes place up there too. And they were made in Canada, I guess. So that makes sense. But the only other one that came up was actually a good point, but it's a spoiler for the game. And it's an older game, but I don't want to say what it is, because it's actually really
Sure.
funny when you end up there. And so I was like, yeah, this is kind of unique. That's actually maybe the most unique part of the game, was it just taking place in Alberta. Very strange, because usually you'd be like, oh, this is in Colorado or something like
Yeah.
that. And they're British, like Supermassive is British, so they chose a place outside of their country, which is very common. So I liked that setting as well, like the Albertan Rockies. And it's really intense up there.
When you mentioned that they're British, in that interview with Larry Fessenden from my buddy Jerry Horror's podcast, The Offering, he said that he got this gig because his people were like, hey, these guys from Sony want to have a dinner with you. And I thought it was funny that he opened with, oh, I got there and they were British. Like, it was shocking to him that these people had accents, but he had some interesting stuff to say about that. He said that, and we all know critically, the Supermassive games never really reached the heights of Until Dawn again, and it seems like sales-wise they didn't either. Larry Fessenden said that the two main players from Supermassive were never as involved again after Until Dawn. And hearing his like inside baseball information about some of the stuff I found interesting, but yeah, he's also an interesting character. He's a fucking maniac.
Yeah, I mean, I love shit like that. I love knowing what's going on behind the scenes. And it is worth noting, like, for the development of this game, like, this game was somewhat tortured. I saw and played the game in its PlayStation 3 version, I went back and looked. I'm cited on the Until Dawn wiki like 4 times, because I was like really early to getting access to it because of my credentials at IGN. And at New York Comic Con, I think in 2011 or 2012, I went hands-on with it and played it. It was a PlayStation Move PS3 game. And I think the scene was like Jess and Mike like going to the cabin or something like that. And someone behind the scenes there Sony saw some promise in it, allowed them. It's very unusual for a game to be allowed to kind of bounce around like that. Things get canceled all the time. And for some reason, this thing survived. But then they didn't really see it through, like in the last 5% in marketing it and getting it out there and even releasing it at an appropriate time. Like, why release it in this late summer? Why not release it in October? Things like that. So it's interesting to hear that, because I wonder where in that timeline he came in. Like, did they have something that was already established and then they brought him in to like make it real?
He had talked about this. He said that he met with them and they were talking about like, we want to do this like Wendigo video game. And he was like, oh, I did a Wendigo movie. It was called Wendigo. And they were like, we know, that's why we're meeting with you. So he took on this writing gig and he said that they wrote it for like a year and a half, maybe longer. And then they were nearly done when the Sony people came to him and they were like, hey, motion capture technology has come way further. So we can get way more out of these performers. Let's rework this. We're actually going to bump it up onto the next console. So what he said was they actually stripped out a ton of dialogue to make room for more active participation going onto the PlayStation 4. So, and then that added a ton of time onto rewriting new things, and then they had to polish it up and change it for PS4. So
Yeah, I would
he
imagine
had talked about this.
that's interesting. I don't even know what the original version ran on because Decima wasn't a PS3 engine.
Mm-mm.
Shadowfall was the first Decima game. So, yeah, it's so interesting to think about that from that perspective. And they did it pretty quick because I would imagine they had the design. Obviously, like you can see the characters in the original version of the game are the same characters. So they have a lot of that stuff out of the way, but it's still rebuilding basically the whole game itself is
Yeah,
a Herculean task. So I remember being so impressed with Supermassive. To me, it seemed like, I remember saying at the time, it was a Quantic Dream game. It was and they say they're open about being inspired by Quantic Dream, with like the way the game is built. And of course they are, specifically Heavy Rain. And I'm interested in that from the sense that when you look at it through the perspective of 2015, and even when the game's being developed, it's like Beyond Two Souls came out in 2013. It wasn't very good in my opinion, and a lot of people didn't like it. It was like a fall from Heavy Rain, and these guys kind of came in, and for me, I was like, maybe Sony's kind of like interested in out Quantic Dream and getting with these guys instead, because they do have something special. But then Quantic Dream comes in 2018 with Detroit, which I think is a really amazing game. And we've never heard from them since. I have no idea what the fuck they've been doing all this time. Star Wars, I guess. But so
great.
at that particular time, 2015, Ready at Dawn is also earlier that year had released The Order 1886, which didn't really work out for them either. And I felt like those were like two possible partners for a different butterfly effect future of PlayStation's first party. Yeah, it just didn't work out. I would love to know, similar to what happened with Demon Souls, when Sony ironically loses From's kind of Souls-like games to Bandai Namco, which is exactly what ultimately ends up happening with Supermassive. It's like, why didn't you just continue? You know, it's like and nurture this instead. It's so frustrating. You know,
Absolutely.
Until Dawn deserves a sequel in some sense, but it just seems weird now. That's all. It's like, oh, now you give a shit. You know,
When you say it deserves a sequel, as I was playing it, because it was basically my first time again, because a couple chapters, like almost 10 years ago, barely remembered it. In the first chapter or two, I was like, you know what? This is why I didn't buy this. It's like, get out of my fucking way. Let me do something. Like, let me play. I stuck with it because we're going to do this show. As I got into the middle of the game, even before the middle, I was like, fuck, this is really good. I've been missing out this whole time. Even going through and getting to the end, I really enjoyed it. And by the time it was over, I'm sitting there going, I can probably clean up this plat. When's that sequel coming out? Like, I can play another one of these.
Cool. Yeah, I do know that some people have a complaint with the pacing. To me, I like the build up in some.
I agree.
Of like, yeah, there's something cool about it, about just letting it breathe a little bit. But there's a fine line between kind of making things last too long or the time to fire or whatever. And I always bring up Wolfenstein, that first Machine Games Wolfenstein game where it's like, Jesus Christ, like what are we
doing?
Like,
Dead Rising.
Yeah, Dead Rising is. Oh yeah, Dead Rising is a great example of that. Like I'm taking photos in a helicopter, and then I'm like in 17 cutscenes, and yeah, fucking annoying as fuck. and that's a shame too, because underneath that is a great game too. Dead Rising is awesome. But it's like
dude, same with Until Dawn. I just bought it. I avoided it forever because I would see gameplay and I'm like, dude, I love Dawn of the Dead. This is basically Dawn of the Dead, the game, you know? And I never played it because the combat didn't look great to me. I wasn't super into it. This remake comes out. I fucking watched Digital Foundry do the comparison. I'm like, shit, it does look good. I bought it. I hate it. Dude, when I saw Chris, I listened to you and Brad gush about it. And I was like, they're playing a different game.
Interesting.
They're having so much fun. And then when I saw Chris tweet, like, does Dead Rising suck? I was like, yes, it does.
Interesting. Yeah, that's so interesting. Yeah, I found Dead Rising indeed is one of those games where the more you play it, the better it gets, in my opinion. And I don't mean that in being like in story. I mean, like the more you can extract out of it, you get to the point, if you really explore the game, you do the fourth day, you do the infinity mode and all that stuff, and you start unlocking things where the game becomes comical, like how fun and ridiculous it becomes. So that in the beginning, it is very difficult and it's finicky and weird. And then by the end, it becomes hysterically arcadey because you have like the unlimited, Mega Buster and a laser sword and all this kind of shit. And you're just cutting and slicing through things and you're playing it in a different way. You almost have to, it is frustrating because you do have to literally earn it. Like you have to earn that ability to play like that. Otherwise it's very, you want to be quiet. You want to conserve your items and, eat just a little bit and not take damage and restart from a different save because you fucked up and all that kind of stuff. So I get it, but I really liked it. I platinumed it. So
I saw that. I sidetracked us. Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's all good. I mean, there are a lot of horror games. Like horror is just so big, and it's funny. Like there's just so much to choose from. And when I tune into various, like when I watch Red Letter Media and they'll talk about a random horror film or something like that, it's like, dude, where are these coming from? Like, I don't even know. I'm so disconnected, from all of it.
Dude, Terrifier 3 is about to outperform Joker 2 at the box office.
Terrifier 3. Oh, dude, Joker 2. I have my theories about that. But
what are they?
It seems to me that it does seem that there's something to. I didn't see it, by the way. I just have read about it or whatever.
I haven't seen it.
I'm not going to see it. I saw Joker 1 randomly on like VOD, and I actually thought it was great. I didn't identify with it like fucking so many people did, but that's the thing, is that I think that like the wrong people identified with it. And you want to like, there felt like there was a meta to ruin it in some sense. And it's like, okay, like that's cool. That's actually kind of interesting in and of itself, but it cost you something, like literally, you made a choice and you could have really extracted crazy, value and money and future possibilities with it, but you decided to go in a different direction. That's cool. I mean, I don't begrudge you that, but it just seems like if what I read about it is true, it's like, Jesus Christ, are you serious? Like, okay, I mean, you want to hit me over the head a little bit more with the obvious nature of this? Like, okay, cool. Am I wrong in my interpretation of this?
I'm the kind of person who I avoid trailers, specifically for movies, because they have no control. I do a thing now where there's a movie I'm excited about, I go and see it blind, then I go home and watch the trailer, and I'm like, that's the final scene. This is about 85% of the way through. That's this character's death. Thank you for that. They do it all the time, so I avoid them. I barely know what Joker 2 is about, but it seems to be the perfect case of the first one, in my opinion, is so good that I walked away going, don't ever touch this. Leave it alone. If you try to do a sequel, even if you try your best, you're going to fuck it up. I don't know that they tried their best, but I do think that they fucked it up.
It's just, like I don't, it's hard for me to believe, like the biggest puncture in that conspiracy theory is like, why would Warner Brothers ever allow that to happen? But what I've realized is that like the game was, or the movie seems to have been made kind of in a silo. So like,
absolutely. And
where like the normal things, I don't know fucking anything about film production, but where the normal things that you would do, like, screeners and, mock reviews and whatever kind of things, and like giving people access and taking notes and all that, like all of that was like, no. And I think, so if that's true, it's like, yeah, maybe that is what happened. It just seemed like I don't want to ruin it for you. I'm not going to say anything. There's one particular thing, you'll know what it is, where it's like, where I when I read it, I was like, I had to go and like be like, you're fucking with me, right? And like go and like look up other sources. And I was like,
is it a spoiler or?
It's something that happens to him. And I'm like,
okay, yeah, then I don't know.
Yeah, and I'm like, really? And
you're going to make me see this movie just on what you're saying.
So it's like, yeah, this is, again, like, I kind of love it from a creative point of view where it's like, yeah, fuck you, like, but on the other hand, I would see it and be like, maybe this is crazy. Maybe I'm an asshole, but it's like, wouldn't you want to try to figure out a way to unify this with Batman? Like, wouldn't that be cool? If he is the Joker and like a future Batman, like in some sense, like, wouldn't that be interesting? Like, why not do that?
It could be, but I think they fucked it up immediately because he's like, Arthur, Joker, is like in his 40s and he meets like 9-year-old Bruce in the first one. So would they have like 29-year-old Bruce fighting like 74-year-old?
Bruce is that old when he becomes Batman. For some reason, I thought Bruce became Batman like in his teens or something like that. Because
I want to see. It kind of depends, but he's usually like in his mid 20s ish.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, then I guess I'd have to wait like 10 or 15 years.
Yeah.
But I looked because I liked the Batman that just came out a few years ago. I thought
Very
it was way
good.
too long, but it was
too long.
but it was fun. And the Riddler was cool and all that. But yeah, I was looking at that. I'm like, yeah, why wouldn't you like try to marry all this? Like, doesn't that seem to make some semblance of sense? But they didn't go in that direction, as you'll find out.
Yeah.
If what I read is true, I mean, what I read,
Yeah.
we'll see. After you see it, I'll touch base with you.
The Riddler also Dagans in the Batman. Remember that part where he's doing a video journal to his followers? And he's like, "Hi guys."
Yeah, that's right. I liked that performance. I liked everyone.
Yeah.
I like the performances in that movie generally. All right, so back to the story itself. I feel like it is strange. Like, one of the reasons I like Children of the Corn, right, which is based on a Night Shift short story from Stephen King or whatever, but that's like my favorite horror movie, is that it feels real, even though it's fucking crazy. Like, when you really think about it, it's like, it's crazy, but the way that the characters, the protagonists, are, driving through and going to a new job and all that kind of stuff, and they find themselves here and are just like looking for gas and like food, and then they run into this town that's been taken over by kids who've killed their parents or whatever, right? And it's like, yeah, like, you at least got there and it made some semblance of sense. You didn't know what you were getting yourself into. The problem, I think, with Until Dawn, from a story perspective, although it's not a huge one, is like, you're all really bad. And what you did is horrible. And then you are all just kind of memory holing it and then going back to the scene of the crime. It's like, I feel like this is an idea that could have been approached differently, where there's like a lot of animosity and people are blaming each other and like everything starts fucked up. That's the only thing I would say from that. Again, I'm not trying to rewrite that. I don't know anything about this stuff, but it's like, it just seems so weird. It's like, yeah, we're all still friends. We played a horrible prank. Like, if I've never known anyone to ever do anything like that in my life. Like, I don't know anyone like these people. I don't know one person like any of these people.
No.
So it's like, you
wouldn't be friends with them if you did.
No, they probably would have embarrassed me or like set me up, and it's weird. So like, yeah, the Mike guy comes off as Nathan Drake, like you said, but like, he's a dickhead. He's like at the center of the fucking, of what happened,
Yeah.
But you never get to that. Like, it would be fun if they were all like blaming each other and being like, it was your fault. It was your fault. A big part of it is like, Josh, I don't think is part of it. I think he's passed out, right? Like, yeah. And I think, is his friend passed out too? The Chris?
Josh and Chris are unaware of the prank. They're both out cold.
Right. So like, they have nothing to do with it. It would be interesting if they all convened and like they were the angry ones, or they were even working together on it or something. I don't know. It just seemed like it was just a little weird. When it sets off and gets into like what it is, it's cool. It's really cool. But that setup, I feel like, could have been a lot more textured and nuanced.
I definitely agree. And I would say that the game kind of offers you the opportunity to texture it yourself. Anytime that there was a conversation where it could be like, trail off, or do you want to talk about what happened? I always did, do you want to talk about what happened? And the other person would either immediately brush it under the rug or be like, we're here to have fun. And it's like, okay, well, those girls are dead and we killed them.
Right, right.
And to your point, the only strife that occurs is jealousy over who's banging who. Like, nobody was like, well, you killed them because it was your idea. It's just like, well, Mike was my man. So
yeah, it's totally true. It's like, that could have been like the whole conspiracy really could have been like, you really, like, it could be multiple people or people doing things to their own ends, plus this whole Wendigo thing. There might not have even been needed to be a supernatural element to it in some sense. Like, you could have.
That's what I meant by it seems like several things smashed together.
Yeah.
I think flamethrower guy, maybe flamethrower guy and Josh, and then Wendigo, those could be 2 or 3 different games. But it needed to be 10 chapters long, I guess.
Yeah, so. It's true. It's crazy. They're all like, who are you? Where are your parents? You're worried about your parent. Jess is talking about her mom's going to be mad, her parents are going to be mad because she lost her phone again. But they're not mad that she was part of a setup in which these 2 girls ran out of the house. And like, is the insinuation that no one knew like the true nature of what happened?
I guess they could have never told the truth.
Yeah,
like they ran out because of our prank. But they don't really talk about that, do they?
Yeah, like, is that a thing? Like, yeah, that's interesting. Because why would all of your parents, all of your 8 sets of parents were all like, yeah, go off to the scene of the crime, dude. Where like the most grisly thing that has ever happened in your life, and you will remember and scar you for the rest of your life.
Not a single mom or dad was like, they might be a bad influence on you.
Yeah, it's very strange. That's contrasted with what I think is a much cooler element to the story, though, of like, and as we said earlier about Josh's family and like how they talk a little bit about Josh's dad being kind of like Grizzly Adams at some point. Micah was making fun of that because she's like, are they serious with the Grizzly Adams reference? Like, they're 18-year-olds or something, or 17-year-olds.
Yeah, a little too dated.
Yeah, but whatever. And it is interesting just from the perspective of like, yeah, this guy kind of has the inclination towards being able to do this, and the tools of the trade are all around you and you don't really realize it. And it's kind of cool. Like, I'm not a very insightful person when I play these games. I'm always like staring with like slack jawed, like trying to figure out what's going on. But when it dawned on me, pardon the pun, that it's like, oh yeah, like there's a cool subtext to all of this.
Sure.
I liked that about the filmmaking and all. So it was I like that idea. That's obviously like some light bulb idea that the guy had and put in here. But so it's
the filmmaking.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Sorry, the filmmaking kind of was a big part of playing into me figuring out Josh was like this. I didn't know that it was like he's mentally fucked up. I thought he was just looking for revenge. But the Saw trap, it was like nobody else is encountering a problem like this that is so like set up and predetermined and elaborate. He's the one that dies in this situation, and we never hear from him again. His dad was a movie director. What would the hack son of a movie director do? He would lampoon some other shit. That's just straight up Saw. From the voice,
yeah, the
CRT television with like the shit coming through, and to a straight up fucking circular Saw. So that was the giveaway. It was like, yeah, he's just a hack copying some shit that he's seen before.
Shout out to Saw, by the way. I haven't seen anything but like Saw 1, maybe 2, but I liked the original Saw a lot. I was like, this is a fucking dope movie,
Dude, a lot of people don't like it, but I will recommend to you Spiral. It's a spin-off that they did that stars Chris Rock in a dramatic role. And dude, you laugh and a lot of people don't like it. I thought it was pretty fucking cool. Yeah, and Danny Glover's in it, and Danny Glover's the fucking man always.
Sure.
So
cool. Yeah, like I have to like, part of me wants to, I know, what is that website? It's like Letterbox or something like that, where it's like movie reviews, right? Is that what people do there or whatever? So I see that, I'm like, it would be cool to like just make a challenge for myself to just start watching a ton of movies and then just for my own edification.
Turn it into a game.
Not sharing it with anyone, but just like ranking them and figuring. That's very much like up my alley because I'm so disconnected at this point. I don't want to make it seem like I'm a fucking ignoramus. I've seen many movies. No. It's just like I don't keep up with them. I'll see a few movies a year, maybe. So like think about the fucking millions of movies that come out and I just don't see any of them. Yeah. So I'm so far behind.
If Letterboxd had trophies, you would open a whole new channel.
Oh, that'd be awesome. That'd be awesome. Yeah. So anyway, I thought that it's funny you figured that out because of the saw blade part. My mind not thinking about it like that is like, yeah, one of these characters is dying now, but not realizing if I just spoiled it for myself, like looking at the trophies and there's a trophy for everyone surviving. So that would give it away immediately. But for some reason, I just didn't make that connection because I was playing it blind that time through again on PS5 and not really remembering what happened. I'm like, oh yeah, so I guess one of these guys dies and I'm not going to kill Ashley. So, and honestly, in my mind, I was like, dude, your life's so fucked up right now. It's like, I'm doing you a favor, Yeah. We all like,
no, I can see that. I can see that for sure.
Yeah. But if I just looked at the trophies before that, I would have ruined it for myself. And I usually
did you get the trophy? Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead, please.
Did you get the trophy for respecting the wildlife on the mountain?
Yes, for not shooting the squirrel and not throwing the snowball right at the.
There's some weird shit going on this channel, man. Between Chris with the hanged elephant talking about he'd probably be okay eating dogs. You got on Summon Sign, they're like, well, Splinter will die in a plane, but we'll save the robot, Nick Valentine. Last Stan's got to figure out this animal shit, man.
Yeah, we have no respect for nature for some reason. I have no idea why. And I don't like the ocean, but I like
Fuck the ocean.
Yeah, the ocean's fucked up.
It's beautiful, but I'm not going in it.
Yeah, it's beautiful to look at. I don't want to be, it's too much. All right, let me see here. Let me look through my notes here. Oh, another thing I really liked is just, and again, this isn't uncommon at all, but I just like winter settings.
Absolutely.
Just perfect. And they're perfect in JRPGs. They're perfect in horror. They're perfect in post-apocalypse, situations. Even permanent winter like The Road. It's good shit, man. Like, there is something, though, very scary and uncanny almost about like a summer, like a midsummer, where it's like it's bright.
Absolutely.
And it's like people are jumping off of cliffs in the middle of the day. Like there's like something fucked up about that too, but that's more stark. This is a much more traditional and subtle setting, which I think is kind of neat. So
one complaint that I'll make about the remake, and I noticed this in the comparisons, was while I'm playing the remake, I'm going, they're not really acting like it's cold. The place is covered in snow. I can see their breath, and everybody's just kind of like bebopping around. I'm in the south suburbs of Chicago. You come from Long Island. We know what harsh winters are like. People are falling in the snow in tank tops, and then they just get up. They don't even brush the snow off.
Yeah, like I was thinking of that too. I was like, is it adrenaline?
Well, in the original, the idle animations, they're like this. And in the remake, they just stand and they don't sell the cold at all.
They probably had no time to finish. The it's funny you were saying about seeing the breath too. Like the breath in the new one looked like I think horrible. Like where it was just like smoke.
It looked like meth smoke.
Yeah, it was weird. It was like really weird. Like there's just some aesthetic things where though the original Until Dawn looks a little dated now, there's nothing that's off about it from the time in which it was made. But there's stuff that I think is just seriously off and inconsistent about the way the new one looks. This might be patched in over time, and I'm going to finish it before the PS5 Pro comes out, but it would be a game to go back for the PS5 Pro and just see, because I think it's 60 frames, which I doubt they're going to have a 60 frames one. If they can't even get this thing running at 30, on the base PS5, I don't see how they're going to do that, but maybe they will. I have no idea. Usually like what PS5 Pro seems like it's doing is smoothing out 60 frame modes or allowing higher resolutions on 60 frame modes. But if you don't even have one, I don't know how the PS5 Pro is going to help you there. Okay. So we have the winter, we have the cabin. I do like the wealth. It's crazy. Like how much money these people have.
Yeah.
What do you think about the connection to, again, you had said this about too many elements. So you have like the Wendigo, and then you have the mental asylum thing, and
the sanatorium.
Yeah, the sanatorium.
I think it's the first time I ever heard that word. I thought it was a sanitarium, unless there's a difference.
Oh, is it? Oh, okay. Yeah, I never even picked that up. Yeah, sanitarium. Yeah, like summer sanitarium. That was. So there's that element, and then there's the dude on the mountain. There's also like this Native American element to it that's not really very explored, but is kind of explored through Flamethrower Man. He has like let's say a dream catcher almost necklace.
Mm-hmm.
So it does seem like a lot of elements, but I think it's to your point earlier, Ian. It's like this isn't a 90-minute movie; it's an 8-hour game, maybe 10 hours depending on how you play it, and if you're like really slow and deliberate and kind of looking around. So yeah, you gotta almost. It can't maybe hinge on one thing, and maybe that's the reason there are so many elements. I don't know.
It could be. With the Native American thing, I was probably 85% of the way through the game, and I was like, oh, they kind of just never mentioned them again, huh? Like, it's in the initial text that you read, and it's like, oh, the protected grounds, and if you pick up all the books, if you look around, you can read the story about the guy who, he could have been saved by like an eagle overhead, but he fired the gun and he drove away the animal that would have saved him. Which was great advice. It kept me from using the guns too much later in the game. Because if you shoot barrels, you can fuck up endings for people. I was looking at all these different things, but yeah, other than those initial like instances of talking about them, we never see any Native American people. We don't know if they're on the land somewhere. Like, it's kind of never mentioned. Flamethrower guy seems to be the only guy who lives up there, and he's carrying on their practices. But through their mention, I was kind of expecting to find out that maybe the Wendigo were the Native Americans, but then maybe the elk backed us up against that mountain because the Native Americans were like, get these fucking people out of here. But I don't know, man.
Yeah, it is. It is interesting. I would love to have known more about that. I think it might have been included in the story just to be like, this is an old problem. You know,
It could be that, or it could be like the dad being a movie director. It did have me wondering, is Josh the bad guy, or did Josh die and the dad is getting revenge for his daughters? So maybe some of those were just setups to keep people from figuring shit out.
That's cool.
But yeah,
that's cooler than the story I think that they came up with. It'd be so interesting, you know, if that was like, or everyone was like kind of working in cahoots or whatever. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Yeah. So, all right. As far as the characters are concerned, who died for you? Because I in my blind playthrough on PS5, no one died for me except for Josh. So everyone, like all of the victims in quotes, lived, which was cool. I did at the end of the game when you're playing as Sam, I did originally go and just run straight to the door and turn the light on and kill everyone in the house. And I was like, I don't want it to go down like that. So I just immediately went to the cross media bar and closed the game and restarted from a checkpoint. But other than that, I played it straight up and just kind of dealt with my choices. But my choices happen to have been everyone surviving. I don't remember what happened to me the original time I played, but in the PS4 playthrough, I'm using a spoiler-free walkthrough that basically is just like, do this, find this in order, just so you know like what's going to happen. And this will get you towards finding all of the collectibles and saving everyone. So that's kind of what I'm working on now. So yeah, what do you have to say about this?
I had everybody survive, including Josh. So I don't know if you got it, but I got a scene at the end where Josh is still alive down in the caves. Did you get that?
No,
I think it's new.
I don't remember exactly. Josh like falls and dies or something from in my version, or like he dies in some way. I don't remember. God, I wish I remember. It's funny. I didn't make much note of it at the time because again, not knowing that everyone could survive, I'm like, oh, he's gonna die. Like if he didn't die with the saw blade or whatever it would have been, then he's gonna die at some point. So I just didn't even make note of like how it happened. I was like, oh, the bad guy died. So
I kept him alive. I got a trophy for getting the best ending for him.
Yeah.
And I think it was because I had discovered that Hannah had no choice but to dig up and eat Beth while she was down there to try and survive because Beth was already dead. And I told Josh that was what happened. And that's how this all started. And then there was like a butterfly effect thing. So Hannah, the Wendigo Hannah, comes and grabs him and they disappear. I found a totem of like the Wendigo hand holding him and he's like looking up at it, but I never saw him die. And then after I finished the game, I don't know if it was before the scene with Sam, the new scene, or after, but it's like an overhead view of like somebody in the caves and he looks up and it's Josh. And I got a trophy like, you got the best ending for Josh. And from what I gather, I think that's new, that you can keep him alive now. I don't think you were able to do it before.
Oh, okay.
I could be wrong about that.
Interesting. So, okay. So I'm not at the end of the PS4 version yet. So I don't remember I don't know what's going to happen there. In you saying you saw the death totem, I think you're right. I think what happened in mine was that his head gets popped like a balloon, like by one of the.
Yeah, there's the death totem of it getting crushed. That never occurred for me.
Right.
It's a hunger totem of the thing holding him by the throat.
Got you. Okay, cool.
How many totems? You're using a guide.
Well, I'm using a guide now. So the sixth, I think it is the hunger totem. I could be wrong. There's a sixth totem type in the new one that wasn't in the original.
Oh, that's new. Okay.
Yeah. And I probably found a little more than half of them organically. Again, not using the guy with the PS5 version. And this was what I was going to say was I was pretty thorough, I thought, but I still missed a lot of things, or not a lot, but a few things. And what I've realized in the PS4 version and finding everything as you go is the dialogue is really intensive. There's like some intensively different versions of what is said. Like they'll let each other know things that they have found in the newspaper clipping or whatever. And I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. It's even a little deeper than I thought it was. So it is worth being thorough as you play the game. Because I know some people are put off by that shit. You know, I don't want the collectibles and stuff. It's like
I wanted to find them because I don't know if this is how they intended for you to play the game, but if I would pick up like a guidance or even a death or whatever, and I'd be like, okay, that hasn't happened yet. So, because obviously it's looking forward. When I would get put back into that character and I would recognize the surroundings, I would study that fucking totem. Because I'm like, when the time comes, I have to be ready. So I would go and like, okay, see, there's stalactites in the background there as Mike. Something's going to try to pull me up because I can see the kicking feet. So I was like, and that's probably how I got everybody to survive. I was tuned in to what they were showing me. If it was just down to memory, like they flash it once, I would have been fucked.
Yeah,
but
fair enough. I want to do so there's another walkthrough that I'm going to play through maybe this weekend after I do the Everyone Survives walkthrough on PS4 where everyone dies. And I want to figure out how that happens too. Because it is clear, like I'm pretty quick on the QTEs and I really don't miss them. But as I understand, like there is a little bit of leeway to make mistakes in the game and like still there's no consequence. The one cool thing that I was exploring more in the more recent playthroughs though was like the statistics in the game. They seem to be like unimportant in some sense, but like they'll track like your relationship meters and then if you're brave or compassionate or whatever. And the little lines, like when you surpass those lines, like different things occur.
Oh,
like
interesting.
But they're not like, I don't think change like butterfly effects and who lives and who dies. I think there's just different. Like another good example is with in the cabin with Jess and Mike. Like if you romance her enough, like don't show her the gun and like do a few things, like she'll be like in her panties when you deal with her.
Yeah, I didn't have that.
Yeah.
Because with Mike, for me, when he picked up the gun, I was like, oh, this guy would absolutely be like, fucking look at this.
Totally. Like, yeah, if you get like the romance meter over that like line that they show, and it's subtle, like they don't really get into it. Like she'll because I played it originally on PS5, and she was in jeans or whatever. And then when I'm playing it through like properly in this new one, she's like just in a bra and panties, and, including like when she's taken out. She goes out and yells at everyone, and then she's taken by the Wendigo and all that, and it's like totally different. It's kind of cool. So there's a lot of cool. I definitely think there is a reason to play it again. If you're there's a lot of games to play. I don't want people to be like, oh, let's waste another 8 or 10 hours of my precious time. But I do think there's enough to see. Like that there seems to be like material changes depending on what you do. I mean, there certainly are. And you had said it earlier as like I was trying to make. It's different than Mass Effect or Infamous or something with binaries or Fallout, where it's kind of stupid to play Mass Effect and then like make both choices. Like no one plays like that. You're either like a renegade or a paragon. In this, it's like, to your point, I'm trying to make the choices as the director almost of like, this is what makes the story most interesting. You're nice to you and you confront you and you like him. And I like that. Again, it's through the PS4 framing of the fixed camera angles. I think it almost adds to that if you play it like that. And it's different even than Quantic Dream games because you're always trying to go towards something in those games. You're trying to make some sort of decision. Obviously, you're making a lot of momentary decisions that you don't realize what the outcomes will be. But I did like that. It almost felt like a removed way to play the game, as if you're playing the person playing the game.
That's exactly how I tried to handle it. And I felt that the best advice that the game gives you is early on. They say sometimes the best choice is to not do anything at all. And I think that's when Chris has the gun and he can shoot the can or shoot the squirrel. And I didn't shoot anything because I was like, well, I'm not going to kill the squirrel for no reason. And if I shoot the can, the squirrel's going to get scared. I don't want to scare this guy. So that kind of put in me like, oh, I don't always just have to do what you're telling me to do. And I think a great example of that is what seems to be like another Saw-ish trap. I'm playing as Mike in the sanatorium, and there's this fucking hand that's like jiggling back and forth, and you can interact with it. And I stood there for a second, and I went, I'm not touching that fucking thing. So I left. I never interacted with it. And after I beat the game, I went through the trophies. There's apparently like Mike can be forced to chop his fingers off to get out of that trap.
Yeah.
And I'm like, the game told me I don't have to do shit. I'm not touching that thing. So
yeah, I did it in my blind playthrough. I used the machete to open the bear trap, and you fail like 2 times. And if you do it a 3rd time, you actually do open it, and then the machete's broken and you don't have it anymore, but he gets out uninjured. And then in this playthrough, I just cut my fingers off in the one I'm doing now.
See, I avoided, you said bear trap. When you grab the hand, does a bear trap come up?
Yeah.
See, I completely avoided the hand. So I looked at it and I felt like that old Eddie Murphy bit from Delirious.
That's so funny.
Where it's like, a white family will be in a haunted house and they're just like, oh, what was that? But if it's a black family and the house is like, he's like, too bad we can't stay though. And they just go live somewhere else.
Yeah, exactly. Like, why are you insisting?
Yeah, I was Eddie Murphy in that situation.
No doubt. Yeah, it's funny. I love that. That's kind of cool, you know, because they do make it clear that you're right in the tutorial. There is like a explicit, like, you don't have, sometimes the right choice is not doing anything. Specifically, I think when you can, I think it's either shooting one of the animals or throwing a snowball at one of the animals. It's like, don't do it. And
Yeah.
I don't think the game makes you ever do that, which is good because I don't want to do that. You know, I don't want to shoot the squirrel. It's so dark. Actually, in some sense, it makes a little more sense considering the nature of these people to be like, yeah, I just blew that fucking squirrel's head off, you know?
If it were a different character other than Chris,
yeah, that's true.
I might have thought like they would do it, but he wasn't a part of the prank. And he's like, he was really nice to Sam, even just on like the lift up. And I was like, okay, he's not trying to hit on her. He likes Ashley, but he's not like forcing himself on her. I think this guy's a good guy. I'm going to play him as a good guy. Even though did you notice there are parts in this game where everything has not just been spelled out to the player, but the characters? We know what the Wendigo is, how they form, what they do, how strong they are. And still, you're playing as Mike later, and you'll see like a Wendigo shadow. He's like, something fucking crazy's going on around here. And it's like, dude, you know what's going on around here.
What is going on? What did you do with Mike and Emily when he holds a gun to her? You didn't shoot her, did you? I didn't.
No, because I was like, you get bit and you turn. That's zombies, not Wendigo. So I didn't shoot her. No.
Yeah, no, I didn't either. I wonder if you even can, or if something happens if you try.
Oh, you can, because I found a death totem of her. Like, her head goes back and her fucking eyeball. There's a big hole.
Right. And then it's pretty. I like the timing of, like, you immediately. That's when you'll find the flamethrower guy's journal, and then So it would be interesting to see that scene actually from that perspective of like, holy shit! Like, if we just waited 5 seconds, we would have learned. That's pretty dark.
Super dark.
I do like how the Wendigo is frustrating just because it's obviously sentient, but it doesn't until the end, like, just go in the house. You know, it's like just running in the house. These are all windows. It's like a glass window. Just like, come in and find them.
that's some convenience shit right there. It's not like a vampire. You have to be invited in. You know, they could just bust in anytime.
Yeah, I like how polite vampires are. I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's nice.
What did you do with when Emily and Matt are coming up and Ashley is looking through the binoculars and sees no, it's Matt by himself. He finds Ashley with the binoculars seeing Emily and Mike together. Did you tell him what you saw?
Absolutely.
Yeah, me too.
Emily was trifling. Yeah. I was like, you seem like a good guy. I'm not about to let this happen to you. She's going to do this to you for your entire relationship. You need to know what's going on. So, and later in the cabin, Emily walks in and is immediately jealous that Mike and Jess are like smooching on the couch. And she gets all up in arms about it after forcing me to go carry her bags. So as Matt, I was like, Emily, fucking chill. Like, you are causing this problem. So I was not about to let Emily run the show.
Yeah, Emily sucks. So. Like, she's definitely my least favorite character. I think she's probably
super hot, but
she's just like the way she's talking to Matt when the fire tower or the watchtower collapses. Yeah. And she's just like such an asshole. It's like, shut the fuck up. Like, what is wrong with you? You know, she's crazy character.
There was a perfect exchange where like she's hanging and she was like, oh, take all the time in the world, you idiot. Whatever thing that I chose, Matt was like, shut up. I'm trying to figure out how to get over to you safely. And it was like, thank you for at least raising the octave a little bit, you know? And then she fell like 200 feet and survived anyway. So.
Yeah, everyone seems to be doing A-okay considering the incredible amount of physical abuse that they've all taken.
Did you have any situations where I feel like this game is pretty good about not putting you in a situation where you choose something and something you did not intend to happen occurs? There was one for me where I'm playing as Emily and I find this like elk skull and I picked it up and you could press X to interact. I figured she would flip it over and find something. She puts it up to her mouth and blows it like a horn. And then the camera pulls out and she goes, shit. And I'm like, first of all, I don't think that this girl would know that that was like a hunting horn. And second of all, what's going to happen now? I did not mean for that to happen.
Yeah, that's
Did that happen to you at all?
No, not really. There were a few points of no return that bothered me. Where, and there shouldn't be like a map or a HUD or anything like that in the game. I'm not saying that, but it's just frustrating when you are trying to explore and you just make the wrong choice of where you go first and the game proceeds. I mean, that's a tale as old as time, really. But in a game that's so story driven, you don't want to have like a threshold at a door where it's obvious that something's going to happen. Like, walk up to this and suddenly this cutscene is going to, I understand you want it to like kind of occur, but it's just disappointing because I want to see and do everything in the game. It's kind of that Persona thing I say where it's like the calendars bothers me. It's like, yeah, just let me see and do everything at my own pace. If you want it to be more earnest, like I was saying earlier, where like there is some sort of internal clock, it's constantly reminding you what time it is, then maybe it's better to not give me such huge, seemingly non-linear environments to explore and just kind of funnel me like it's an Uncharted game,
I tried to play it like Dead Space. You can press the button to see where the laser tells you to go, and you always go the other way to see what's going on over there. Anytime I had a partner, or whether I had the dog with me, who I made sure I kept alive, wherever they would go, I'm like, okay, let me look over here first, because I got to find the totems, I got to find the images and shit. Dude, if I were Mike and I had the wolf dog with me, the part where if you keep him alive this long, because I think the dog can die, when you're down in the hole and you're like, come on, buddy, and he looks at you and he was just like, I'm gonna go this way, and Mike goes, okay, I'll see you on the flip side. I would have died there because I would have been like, no, buddy, come on, we can get out of here.
Yeah, exactly. I was sad when the dog walked away. It's funny. So again, the blind playthrough, when I first saw the dog, I got scared and I kicked him.
No,
but you can kind of turn it around. Like it does give you a little bit of leeway where it's you can pet him and then you give him the bone and everything works out the exact same. Because I felt bad. I'm like, oh my god, like the little like circular thing was closing and I thought he was gonna bite me or something. But I should have known.
That's
better.
where the game said you don't have to do stuff all the time.
Right.
I felt like it was a trap, and it was. The trophy says, even though the dog goes the other way, it says that he survived. So in my head, he's still living up there hunting squirrels and rabbits and shit. He's having a great life.
Yeah, and they kind of suggest, I only got this on my second playthrough. I don't know why I didn't really see it the first time, but it kind of suggests that they are with Flamethrower Man and they are kind of somewhat, not domesticated, but are used to being around humans. So that might have helped Mike figure out, because he looks through at one point and sees them with him. And so that might help him make a more calm decision, as opposed to if you have truly met what you would have assumed would be like a totally wild wolf. Yeah. That would fucking...
You'd be fucked.
I wonder, like, it sounds like a silly thing to say, but like, what is if you encounter a wolf in the wild, like what percentage are they going to attack you? And what percentage are they going to run?
Wolf attacks on humans are actually very low.
Okay.
I think a lot of times it just... And you know what? That's actually a great thing to bring up, because on this mountain, they tell you early on, there are bears, there are wolves, there are coyotes. If everybody was showing up and just walking around by themselves in the pitch black on this mountain, they would have gotten fucked up. So to show up and it's still daytime makes a lot more sense just from a safety standpoint.
Yeah.
But yeah, wolf attacks are pretty low. I think the scary thing would be, if you're out and you encounter a wolf, there are probably many others that you don't see.
Right.
They see you.
Yeah. And they can coordinate and take your ass down pretty easily, I would imagine. Who was your favorite character? Which character did you sympathize with or like the most?
I think they kind of push us in the direction of Sam.
Yeah, definitely.
And we know her just because Hayden Panettiere is a big star. She's super hot, so you like her immediately. She's a good person, so you like her immediately. She's the one who she like ruins the prank, so Hannah doesn't make a fool of herself, which then winds up to her dying.
Right.
So I really liked Sam, and I thought it was impressive that this game like made me let go of how much I hated Mike. By the end of the game, I was like, Mike's gonna fucking get us across the finish line. He's got the shotgun. He's got the torch. We're going to make it, and Mike's going to carry us.
Yeah.
So those are my two leads. What about you?
Yeah, I agree with you. The game does really push you towards Sam, and like that, it's funny. I forgot to say it at the beginning, and you might not have remembered this, but that whole intro sequence is different. Like they show a lot more of how they set up the prank and all of that with Hannah than they do in the original, where it's like kind of, it's not more insinuated, but it's like it's quicker. And so that was a major addition as well. But in the original as well, they do make sure you see that Sam kind of comes in after the prank has already gone on, but she does know that it's going to happen at some point.
Yeah.
And so it is like, who's the least asshole, but they're kind of all assholes in some sense. Not uncommon in film, I guess. And this is kind of a filmic game, but I like her. And I think maybe Ashley would be like I
liked Ashley.
Yeah. Like just because I felt like maybe she was the most relatable or reasonable in some sense. And she was in on it too in the year before. So she's not a great person. Chris is cool. He seemed, like you said, he didn't come off as like creepy or weird, which I like that. Like, yeah, he doesn't hit on Sam, and he doesn't try to like make moves on anyone or anything like that. And he's very I find it relatable in some sense, because like I was similar, where I was like, oh, I don't know, man, like
I don't want to fuck this up.
Yeah, and like the signals couldn't be any louder, and you're just like, oh, I'm just fucking weird, and I don't want to. So
it is.
Yeah, good.
You mentioned that he's not creepy, but it should be pointed out. Ashley looks like she might be 20, and he looks like he's easily 39.
Right, that's true.
That's just the casting.
That's true. That's a good point. He actually, Chris looks. This is a really obscure reference. I don't think you'll get it. It would be awesome if you did. But do you know that there's a rap rock band from the early 2000s called Hot Action Cop?
I've heard of them, but that might be as deep as my knowledge.
He looks like the singer in that band. If people look it up, yeah. You
probably know more about Hot Action Cop than anybody else.
Yeah, no, I definitely do. I definitely do. There's no doubt about it. They only had one real record. I discovered them from Need for Speed Hot Pursuit 2, because they had two songs. That soundtrack was fucking great. Oh my god, Ultra Spank was on that soundtrack. The Buzz Horn was on that soundtrack. Uncle Kracker,
dude, Uncle Kracker, man.
All right,
he did the X Factor theme song for the WWF.
Oh, did he? I didn't know.
It was really out of place. It was very strange.
Uncle Kracker. Yeah, Uncle Kracker did his thing. Wasn't he with Kid Rock? I wasn't a Kid Rock fan. Like I don't like Kid Rock, so I don't really know much about that sphere. But I'm pretty sure that's where he comes from.
I think so. Yeah, I knew Kid Rock because he did shit with the WWF back in the day. So.
Yeah, for some reason, like Kid Rock is like right up my alley, but I just wasn't. It's the same thing with Insane Clown Posse, which was like, at the time probably right up my alley, but I just wasn't into it. I'm just like, this shit kind of sucks, Like I was gonna say there are a couple ICP songs I've heard where I'm like, this is actually kind of good, but I'm not gonna admit it more openly than that. I'm not the ICP the Gathering of the Juggalos or anything like that.
No, the ICP have made me laugh a lot of times. I think they're genuinely funny. Kid Rock just always came off as a boner to me. It's like, I don't know, man. Like Limp Bizkit's cool as shit. You're not. There's a line that you cross. I don't think you're cool.
Yeah, I wasn't into it. My hockey coach, who was in his 20s, was like really into Kid Rock. I remember, and he used to drive me to practice and games sometimes, and I would always be listening to Kid Rock. And he was it Ball with the Ball? Yeah, Ball with the Ball, like that record, and and I'm just like, yeah, I'm not into it, because it's more of like a Southern rock style, like which is fine, but not for me.
Some Anthony Kiedis gibberish mixed in there.
Yeah. Ball with the Ball. All right. What else? Let me see. Oh, so what did you think of we talked a little bit about it, but where do you think that this would go from here if they were to revisit this? It kind of has the infamous or Mass Effect problem, maybe more the infamous problem, where you're going to have to move forward reasonably. You're going to have to make a decision about what the canon is. You're going to have to tell people what they did at some point. It's like how Infamous, like the first Infamous ending, like I think it's the good ending. That's the canon ending. So even if you played the game as a bad Cole, it almost feels like it never happened. It's what I felt like when the expanded universe was blinked out of existence for Star Wars. It's like, so this never happened. And even though I experienced it, it doesn't matter. It feels like it's this ethereal thing it's fan fiction. Someone made it up. That's the one thing I don't like about choice-based games being followed up. What would be fucking baller and so unnecessarily expensive and would never happen. is to like make a game that truly works off of what happened in the original every beat.
Sure.
You know, and you can make a lot of shortcuts in that, where like most of the characters are not even relevant, it doesn't matter, and you have little things for each of them. But that would be kind of cool. But that would be, if Until Dawn was a mega hit, you would do that. But this is the antithesis of that. Like, I'm wondering if they even, you had brought up earlier seeing like, you know, the Hayden Panettiere interview, the new footage, but they showed her doing mocap, and it's in stuff that's not shown in this game. So my assumption is that it's happening, you know, like, or at least
my assumption was that mocap was the new scene of her in bed.
But isn't she like walking like and talking or doing something in one of the scenes? I got to go back and watch it, but it didn't seem like it grafted to anything that we had seen before. You know?
The only thing that sticks out to me of her, because she had like colorful hair and she was in the mocap suit, was I remember her like sitting at the edge of like a white box. And to me, I was like, oh, that's Sam sitting at the edge of the bed.
Yeah, I'll have to go back and watch that and try to graft it back better onto that, because I was wondering, like, would it be a sequel? Could it conceivably be a sequel? Is it like an expansion or like an epilogue? You know,
maybe it depends on how this does, but I definitely think that there's so much more that you can do with a game like this, and it doesn't have to be related to the Wendigo at all. If we live in a world where the Wendigo is real, fucking anything can be real. And you could also not tie up loose ends, but just avoid any of those problems of like, well, what did you do with Josh? What did you do with Mike or Matt? If the only person who comes back is Hayden Panettiere, you solve a lot of problems for yourself there. You might have to get some people to accept that their death for Sam didn't happen, but that's a lot easier than, you know, getting everybody back. And Rami Malek's probably expensive as fuck now. So.
Right. That was part of what I thought before I knew that they kind of had maybe designs for something else. That was kind of what I thought maybe was the motivating factor, is not only the film, which we'll talk about in a minute, but where I was like, yeah, like they nailed these actors down before they were big. I mean, this is pre Mr. Robot, or around when Mr. Robot was being filmed. You know, Rami Malek, certainly before didn't he win an Oscar or something? So it's like,
yeah, I think, what was that? Was that the Freddie Mercury movie?
Yeah,
or something?
Right. So it's like, I looked at it and I'm like, yeah, maybe they realized their lawyers looked at it like, we actually have like perpetual rights to this shit. It makes us look great that we have this kind of connection. Let's leverage it. We might not ever be able to get him back, but we can at least use what we have. And so that's what I thought the motivation was. And then I was thinking about the film, and I keep forgetting about the film. And I wanted to ask you about it a little bit, if you had any thoughts about it. Because it was only revealed, I think, earlier this year or late last year, but they're already done filming it as of a few days before we're recording this. I am skeptical of this just because, isn't this a pretty rote and mundane thing for horror if it's not playable? I mean, isn't aren't we able to overlook all of the tropes and inconsistencies and seams in the story and stuff because we're playing it? It's very similar to Quantic Dream. Like, the story of Ethan Mars would be fucking stupid if we had to watch it. It's being it, and it's being in the moment and not being able to fail, but every decision matters. And you're kind of just on this inexorable train, and it's just going. I feel like if you lose that energy, it's whatever. So I'm kind of curious what their plan is here, but PlayStation Productions has been pretty successful so far. I would say everything they've done has been at least good so far, if not excellent. So like The Last of Us is excellent. Twisted Metal, I think, is good. Uncharted was good. Gran Turismo was good. So maybe we should believe in it a little bit more. What are your thoughts on this as someone who kind of understands this genre a lot better than me?
I'm not offended that they would do it. It makes sense that they would try to do it, because they're, like you said, there's a lot of things that they are trying to switch over. I would never have assumed like, oh, let's do a Gran Turismo movie, and they did that. I didn't see it. I assumed the Uncharted movie would be dog shit, and then I watched it as a huge Uncharted fan. I was like, this isn't bad.
No,
this is
good.
fun.
It was good.
I think the casting is fucking horrible, but the spot of the fucking pirate ship in the air and they're doing, I was like, this is Uncharted.
Yeah.
I would argue that people are going to get mad at this. I would argue that this scene gets Uncharted more than most of Uncharted 4 does. If we're just being honest, Uncharted 4 doesn't feel like an Uncharted game to me.
Hmm.
So I'm not offended that they're going to try to do it. I read a comment from the director, and I think he had just responded to somebody on Twitter or Reddit or something, and he said that he would not have been interested in doing this adaptation if it was just taking the game and making a movie out of it. So he seemed to insinuate that there are other things that they can explore and that there are changes that they can make. So I think it could, and this is just totally conjecture, speculation. It could be cool if maybe the movie is how we get to the second game. Do we make this movie canon?
Hmm.
Do we have a Sam who survives? You know, because why did they make this remake in the first place? You have to assume it's because they're going to have this movie. They love that synergy, and they don't want you to be like, "Hey, go play that fucking 10-year-old game."
Yeah,
because
true.
it's just like the movie. Maybe they tie this maybe sequel more to the movie than they did the first game.
Yeah, that's interesting.
That could be one avenue that they go down.
It has, and looking at it, it doesn't seem to have a release date yet. I assume next year it'll, if they just wrap, they have to obviously do post-production and all the rest. So yeah, next year probably. It is interesting, again, not knowing much about film. It's David Sandberg is the director. He directed Lights Out. When I look at some of these movies, I'm like, these must be some of the richest people in Hollywood, because Lights Out, budget $4.9 million, box office $148.9 million. He directed Annabelle Creation, $15 million budget, $306 million box office. It's like these guys are quietly making enormous amounts of money. And then I was looking at the writer, and the writer is from the original Annabelle and the sequel 2, which was like 6.5 million on 257 million made. And then he wrote The Nun, $22 million budget, $366 million. It's like, geez Louise, dude. These, you don't see
the guy.
I had no idea like these guys were grinding like this. You know, so it's very respectable cast of people.
The guy who, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's it. No, please.
The guy who directed the first Annabelle also directed Mortal Kombat Annihilation, which is one of the biggest pieces of shit ever made.
Sure.
But yeah, cheap horror, you spend a couple $1 million, you can put a movie out there that makes $250 million sometimes. And I think that's what a lot of these companies are going for. That's what Blumhouse became famous for. And Blumhouse are getting into horror games now. The whole thing that Jason Blum put together was he wanted to take horror writers and directors. We'll give you a little bit of money. Like, we're not going to give you much, but you can do whatever the fuck you want. And just give us a movie and we'll put it out. And there are so many Blumhouse pictures that have been enormous. And a lot of it is attributed to just staying out of the creative's way. Fewer cooks in the kitchen wind up, you get a movie that people talk about and people go to see it. Some of these, they come out in their first week and it's like, oh, that did okay. But the word of mouth, the second week is bigger, the third week is bigger, which you don't see very often. So I'm interested in how these Blumhouse games are going to turn out. That the PS1 looking game, I'm interested in that.
Yeah, it's cool. I dig that. Like, when you look at the numbers, it's like, yeah, you make so much money on one of these films that you could risk making 20 more of them and still have $100 million left over for just you.
Yeah.
And then one of those can make another $300 million, eradicating all of the money you just spent and then allowing you to invest in 10 more. I'm like, that's pretty fucking nice. As opposed to these guys making $200 and $300 million movies, just like with games. It's like, this is just crazy. You're never going to get costs of AAA and AA games down to $5 million or $10 million, but 50 million, 75 million, 100 million, like this is the sweet spot. But you're seeing difficulty, I think, even with keeping costs down in games. Like, I have this theory with Remedy that they are in some sort of trouble because of all the people they're connecting with. Annapurna taking more money out of from Tencent, borrowing money and trying to make these really lean games and realizing maybe you can't compete with maybe you can't make Control 2 for $50 million. So we'll see. But I love film because because it's linear. And most of these actors are just newcomers. I don't want to say serious people because it's an insult, but well-known actors are not going to do these kinds of films. So these films are often, it seems like, being made for less than like what a person would be paid to be in a movie if they were a bigger person, which is cool. So I respect the shit out of that. And I'll be really interested to see how this film does. Again, I do believe PlayStation Productions is doing better than I thought. They don't have anything other than The Last of Us that I think is like superb. And that's the subject matter, in my opinion. But I think that they've treated everything with a level of respect. I think even Twisted Metal, though I think Strange is pretty good. Again, Twisted Metal is supposed to be in the current day, not in the post-apocalypse. It would be more interesting that way, but I digress. I think that they did what they had to do. It's pretty cool. So I'll give them the benefit of the doubt moving forward.
I mean, I hope so. They've now released this game twice and didn't promote it either time. Maybe they'll promote the movie. You know, maybe.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, dude, the reality is that the original Until Dawn, they didn't push it hard, but it got so much more attention than this. Like, they were releasing trailers for it. I don't know if you remember the PSX. It was in 2014. It was like crazy when they showed it. It was like a really exciting thing where people in the audience were like making the decisions and everyone was screaming and going crazy as they were playing the game on stage. There was like a hype for it, even though Sony wasn't incumbent on Sony to push it themselves. This just seems to, it's like I said, it's like Shadow of the Beast remake or something. It's like, why did you even bother if you're going to just send this thing to die? I'm keeping a close eye on Ballistic Moon just to see if they're going to keep staffed and if they're working on the next game, if Firesprite's working on it or whatever, what it might be, if it's an expansion. But knowing like you said, their obsession with synergy, and they no longer do things just to do them anymore. They look at everything as an IP. We know that Hiroki Totoki was saying that they feel like they have no IP. That's of course nonsense. They have a ton of IP, but now you see them mining it. And I think we're going to see more of this, if anything, not just Until Dawn, but I think just a lot. The rumor circulating that the God of War PS2 and PS3 games are going to be released in a collection.
I would be all over that. I love those games.
Just constantly going backwards, and it's good, but I hope they do a better job than I think they did with this. I think that this needs like some polish. It's not ready for prime time. I'm sure they felt pressured to release it when it was released, but it does.
Let me ask you this. Go ahead. On that note, I saw that, and when I was younger, pretty much when you were there and when Greg was there, when Ryan was there, I knew everybody on IGN. I would go and I would read what you guys wrote, and then of course there's the review score. I don't go to IGN anymore. I don't really know any of them, so I can't judge their taste and know if I agree with them or not, or if I line up with them. I saw whoever wrote for IGN, the review for this, they gave it a 5.9. And playing through this, it's not a 5.9 to me. It's not even close to that, which makes me wonder, and I'll ask you, do you think that they are factoring in the who asked for this into that review? Because this game to me is not, it's not a 5.9.
No, I don't. Yeah, I don't even know what I would give it. Maybe like a 7 or a 7.5, I think, something like that.
Sure.
Maybe more like a 7, because I just think it needs to be cleaned up. It's reviewing games is tough, and why I hate quantifying things with scores, because it gives it some sort of power that's then factored into this. It's all of these scores that are arrived at in these very subjective ways, then put into completely objective math.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, okay, so we're supposed to get something out of this, I guess. I say that because I think that it could potentially factor in why was this made? And then someone can approach and say yeah, that is kind of a relevant part of it. Do you review just the very existence of it, or do you review the holistic view of it? And I actually don't know. I think it's probably safer to just review the game as is, as opposed to saying well, no one fucking asked for this, and I'm going to hold it against that. But it's but that is kind of a valuable thing. Maybe that should be factored in, because if you're looking at the score as something that it's should I buy this? Should I give it time? Should I wait for a sale? It's well, do you want to know about the game, or do you want to know about the holistic situation around it? That maybe it's not even worth playing at all. Maybe you should buy the original for $20. The original is also on PS Plus Extra, so a lot, many millions of people are subscribed to that tier and can just play it without having to spend any money. So that's difficult, man. This is why I just hate reviewing games, and I hate, this is a review we've done that's going to be 2 hours long with no conclusion. And that's that's art, I mean,
I agree.
But I don't begrudge them trying to find an angle, because I've had my different angles through my reviews too. And that could be an angle of why does this thing exist? Yeah. Okay. I mean, that's why I think you got to read it. And then if you can even take the score seriously. And then you got to look at the rubric, and then you got to look at other websites' rubrics and how they're all mixed together. Like someone's 7 is another's 6, yet they're put together on Metacritic with just those numbers unadjusted. It's messy,
Yeah.
But I really don't. I'm part of the problem because we reference Metacritic scores sometimes, but I also just would not be sorry to see it blinked out of existence.
I agree.
I'm not trying to be a dickhead. I'm not the fucking biggest person in the games industry, like by any stretch of the imagination. But
the biggest Patreon.
Yes, we do. We do have that. But I'll go to a Metacritic page for like a game, and I'm like, who the fuck are any of these outlets?
Yeah.
What is this? Like, we give this power to it's not the fucking Wall Street Journal and all these different, it's like, xboxbros.com and playstationfanboys.com. And it's like, I've never even heard of I've been in this industry for 20 something years. Like, I don't even know what these sites are. And you're giving them Metacritic scores. And I know that they're weighted and the weighting is mysterious. For instance, IGN is worth, I think, many times more than a lot of these outlets on the weighting. But just them being there at all legitimizes this need to quantify games with numbers. It's like giving a fucking Baroque painting a score. It doesn't make any sense. Yeah. It's like, yeah, this Renaissance painting is a 7. It's like, what? Like, why don't you write about it and review like the motif and what draws your eye and the technique, and then let people kind of draw their own thing out of it? It's just, game criticism is just generally broken. So I don't want to shit on my old website because I'm really appreciative of IGN, but I think generally speaking, the journalistic lens of the media is dead. The critical lens is, digging its own grave right now, because I just don't think it's very quality driven. I think that like people are finding a lot more use out of like video essays and
absolutely,
and streams and just looking at it. Like, you can learn so much more in some sense by just looking at a game and watching gameplay for 10 minutes. I don't read fucking almost anything. I read reviews sometimes if I'm curious what people have to say about a product, specifically if I'm going to cover it or I've already covered it. Like, did you agree? Like, what did you find in it? But generally speaking, it's fun to kind of approach these things blind and draw out what you think is important and bringing that to the audience, and then letting other people kind of draw out their own experiences too and not try to quantify it so much. I hate that shit.
I agree.
Anyway, that's a rant. Well, that's
It'll give me something to clip out.
Oh yeah. Ian, I've told you guys many times on Sacred now that, I post clips on Twitter. I'm monetized now. I actually did get monetized. I think I'm making like hundreds of dollars a month or something on there, because I'm not really doing it very regularly. But Ian's the one that clips those things out for me to use most of the time. So keep up that good work as well. I appreciate you. But I appreciate you for being here and to talk to me about Until Dawn. I hope you enjoyed your time with the game and are grateful that you played it. I'm grateful to have played it. It's like it's an October settling kind of game. We're getting into the spooky season. It felt like a nice predicate for things to come. So I'm happy that it came out. I liked it, but I don't know that I really recommend it. Like, I really think if you've not played the original Until Dawn, you should just play that. And then if you're really into that, then maybe you want to consider the new version. But I don't think if you've never played Until Dawn, you should just jump into the new one. I actually think the original one, from my perspective, it's just finer, and more differentiated. But if you're into Until Dawn and you're curious about the new one, it's about value to you. But $50 to me is a reasonable price of entry, I think, for it. And maybe you want to wait for the Pro and maybe like look at Digital Foundry's stuff when the time comes. And I bet you the game will be discounted before you blink. If it's selling the way it is, I imagine in a few months it'll be discounted.
This will be a Black Friday deal, big time.
Yeah, so maybe you want to wait. I mean, if you can get it for like 30, I would say definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, as someone who basically played through it for the first time, I did have a lot of fun with it. As I was going through, I was like, shit, I'm glad he asked me to do this one, because I'm having a good time with this. And I would not have bought it otherwise. And it's been out for 10 years almost 10 years, and I never went back to finish it. So yeah, I had a good time with it. If someone was like, oh, should I buy it? No, wait. I agree with you. It'll be on sale because it's not doing very well. But there, you know what? There was one little section that I wrote down here. In the early going, you probably noticed, because they beat you over the head with it, how sexual the dialogue is. And granted, these are all horny, like, teenagers, so of course. I wrote down a few fucking winners here.
Yeah, hit me.
One of them was Mike, who hit us with the line, "Looky, looky, who's going to fire up some nookie?"
Yeah, yeah.
That stood out. How about Jess, before he gets the fire going, says, "It's so cold my tongue could get stuck to your flagpole." And there was also her talking about the bedroom getting presidential and Mike asking, "Would you like a ride on Air Force One?" It felt like every sexual thought they've ever had.
Yeah.
The two guys were like, "Put them all in. I want every line in the game."
Yeah, these people, like, God, when I was 16, 17, 18, I was not this sophisticated. I was not, I wouldn't have been able to start a fire, wouldn't have had any lines ready. Like, that's why I'm saying, like, everyone in this, I just don't even think about them as high school kids. Like, I really just think about them as people at a cabin, like 20 somethings and maybe even a few 30-year-olds. Or
there
older.
are times that it was written by a near middle-aged man. So
yeah,
what he would do in that situation.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, it's cool. It is cool. I like the tropiness of horror in some sense. It's fun. But yeah, it is again, it's just everyone just looks so old. You know? And I think we're kind of like vacillating in some sense. Micah and I talk about this, where I look at the 70s and the 80s, like the disco era and then like the new wave era and all of the rest, and the makeup's really severe and women look, they look hot, but they look older. Like, it's like, you could tell the thing was to look, I want to look like my fucking mom or something, like, and wear like shoulder pads and all that. It's like, okay, cool. And then in the 90s and into the 2000s, it was like, no, now we want to look like younger. And that was kind of the generation I grew up in, where it's like, girls weren't wearing severe makeup and all that kind of stuff. It was like to have a youthful kind of thing. And now I think when I see people again, like younger people again, I'm like, now everyone wants to look older again.
It's looping around. It's the spiral, the cycle.
Because I noticed this when I like go out, even when we were in San Diego for the live show, we were at In-N-Out one night, and there's like, oh, it's a great place that people watch, and people are just coming in, and it's like, damn, you really can't tell like this guy looks like he's 16, he could be 30. This girl looks like she's 35, she could be 15. This person, it's like, what is going on? Like, I feel like everyone's always trying to be what they're not, whether it's aging up or aging down, as opposed to just being, you know, and it's not quite as severe as it was, but I've noted. So Until Dawn was made in like the kind of the in between, because now I feel like, we're getting back to like not the literal shoulder pad era, but like that kind of severity. Like, now everyone
Until
looks like
Dawn,
mom again.
shoulder pads.
Yeah. Cool. All right, Ian. Well, I appreciate you, my friend. Thank you for taking the time to talk to me about Until Dawn Remake on PlayStation 5. It's also available on PC. You played it on PS5, right? I heard it's
yes, sir.
I heard it's kind of fucky on PC, and I know it's not selling well over there either. A lot of people are wondering, like, is the PC stuff even really working out generally for them anymore? Or is like kind of the sheen gone? And I'm like, actually, it's kind of a win-win situation if you look at it like that. If you're one of the people that's like, this is going to hurt PS5, well, if the games are not selling well over there, then they're not. It's not hurting anything, because people are not buying the games, so they're not buying a PS5. They're just not playing the games. And then on the other hand, it's like, but you can still make, if you believe in the PC stuff, it's like, so it's not affecting PS5, thus we can just make a little bit of money over here, and that's fine too. So I actually think it's kind of flattening out in a way that pleases everyone, where it's not, there's no threat, I think, of PS5 being overcome by these PC releases, but then you see them released to a few thousand sales, basically, and it's like, well, maybe the sheen is gone, or maybe it's the wrong games,
Or it's just the few people that don't want to buy the console, and they're like, well, I do want to play that. And even if you can sell it to just that small group of people, it's still money that you weren't making before.
Yeah.
As long as it doesn't take that much money to put it over there, then who does that hurt?
Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of this stuff is just made concurrent to each other and then ported at the last second. That's how we make our games. I don't think it's much different. Like, our games are still not. We're releasing a game pretty soon, and I don't think we're really have them running on. Oh yeah,
like one of these. How about that?
Yeah, how about something that's a game that's going to be intimately associated with that.
I don't little hintskis there.
Yeah. So, by the way, I just as a postscript to this is Peter Stormare, who plays Dr. Hill, reprises that character in the movie, which is kind of cool. So
hell yeah, I love him.
Yeah, and he's the crazy facial shit that they do to him aside. I do like that you come to realize that the office setting is reflective of where Josh is at the time in the game. Mm-hmm. So I first read it as like decay, but it's actually not. It's like actually more representative of what's actually happening, which is cool. and then so yeah, go on.
Do you remember that Peter Stormare is Slippery Pete, who was helping George move the Frogger?
Yeah, in Seinfeld, yes. One of the last episodes of Seinfeld.
Holes, I need holes.
Yeah. Shit rules. Oh, all right. Well, Ian, where can people find you on social media, YouTube, the rest?
616 Entertainment on YouTube. I do horror movie stuff, video games, wrestling, boxing, all sorts of shit. If any of that is interesting to you, it's over there.
Cool, man. Yeah, I appreciate you being available for this, making yourself available. I wouldn't have
anytime.
When I emailed you a few days ago, my assumption was actually like, I bet you did play it. We're friends on PSN, so I probably could have just looked, but I didn't. And then I didn't feel so bad asking you to do it because it's so short. I wouldn't have pinched you otherwise to have done it or recorded so quickly.
Anytime you need a chair filled, dude, reach out.
Yeah.
I would imagine most of the time I can fucking make it happen, and I'm always happy to come on. I'm grateful for the invitation. So anytime.
Cool, man. Appreciate it. And appreciate all of you out there as well for your kindness and support of Last Stand Media on Patreon, patreon.com/laststandmedia for early ad-free access to all of our shows, and laststandmedia.store for merch. Hope you enjoyed our discussion about Until Dawn and Until Dawn Remake. Go play it for yourself, specifically on PS4. Maybe get the PS5 version a little bit more quarter when it's cheaper. We'll see you next time for more. Until then, be well. Goodbye. Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is a product and trademark of Last Stand Media and Collins Last Stand LLC, and is proudly recorded in the USA. The show is conceived by, is written by, and is directed by me, Colin Moriarty. My co-hosts are Chris Raygun Maldonado and Dustin Furman. The show is produced by executive producer Dustin Furman. It's edited by associate producer Ben Smith. All of Last Stand's theme music is by my best friend, Ramon Narvaez. As you know, all of Last Stand's shows, including Sacred Symbols, are fan-funded on Patreon at patreon.com/laststandmedia. The following names are at the producer level on Patreon, our highest tier, and we're grateful for your thoughtful and kind contributions to our independent endeavor. Thank you.